Don't listen to them. You're perfect just the way you are.
You're not even human. You're just a rich robot with one leg. Those were the words that shattered a quiet afternoon in the Hamptons. Laughter erupted from a group of polo-shirted kids, all sun-kissed and full of privilege, pointing at the boy who stood alone by the edge of the pool. He didn't flinch. 10-year-old Eli Whitmore, the only son of tech billionaire Grayson Whitmore, simply stared back. One leg gone below the knee, replaced by a sleek prosthetic made of carbon fiber and metal. A $35,000 piece of technology, crafted with precision, and still not enough to earn him a seat at the kids' table. This wasn't just about a leg. It never island. In the world of luxury and wealth, difference is a threat, a scar, an eyesore, and in Eli's case, it made him the invisible heir. The resort was packed that day. Palm trees swayed gently, ice clinked in glasses of imported mineral water, and laughter filled the air everywhere except around Eli. He stood like a ghost among the living. Seen but ignored. Until she walked in. Amara. She was everything Eli wasn't allowed to be: warm, open, unapologetically human. A young black woman in her early 20s, working as a seasonal waitress while finishing her psychology degree. Tight curly hair tied back, sharp cheekbones, and those eyes, those deep, soft, piercing eyes that seemed to see through concrete. She saw him. Not the leg, not the name, him. But in a place like the Hamptons, even a glance from someone like Amara was an act of defiance. And smiling? That was rebellion. Because in the unspoken hierarchy of privilege, black and poor had no place near white and wealthy. Still, she approached. "Do you like chocolate or vanilla?" she asked, holding 2 ice cream cups. Eli blinked. It was the first time in 3 days anyone besides staff had spoken to him. And this wasn't staff. This was a human being. That one question changed everything. See, this isn't just about a lonely boy and a brave woman. This is about the walls we build. About who gets to belong and who's left standing outside, watching from the cold. This is a black story, but it's also a human story. It's about courage that doesn't scream, but shows up anyway. About kindness that costs nothing, but means everything. It's about Amara, who didn't have money, status, or power, but had a heart that refused to follow the rules of silence. And it's about Eli, who would learn that sometimes, the people we're told to ignore are the ones who save us. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong because of how you look, how you walk, or where you come from, this story is for you. Welcome to Hidden Worth. Because sometimes, the people with the least power show us the most truth. Stick around. You won't believe what happens next. Amara Jackson was used to being overlooked. She had walked into rooms where no one made space, spoken truths no one wanted to hear, and smiled through stares that weren't meant to be kind. But she had also learned something most people never do: how to see people others ignore. That was her quiet superpower. At 22, Amara was in her final year at Howard University, majoring in psychology with a minor in creative writing. She wasn't just smart, she was sharp. She read books like other people scrolled through Instagram. And she listened. Really listened. Not to answer, but to understand. She had taken a summer job as a server at a luxury resort in the Hamptons. It wasn't her dream, but it paid better than waitressing back in DC. And if she saved enough tips, maybe she wouldn't have to take out another loan next semester. Plus, there was something about rich people, something fascinating, strange, and deeply broken. Like watching a play where everyone forgot they were acting. Amara didn't fit in here, not with her brown skin and box braids, not with her thrift store sneakers, and definitely not with her refusal to shrink herself. But she wasn't there to fit in. She was there to observe and survive. Most of the guests never looked her in the eye. They glanced past her like she was part of the scenery, like the napkins or the pool chairs. But every once in a while, someone would slip up and see her as a person. It was rare. But when it happened, she never forgot. The first time she saw Eli, he was sitting on the edge of a lounger near the infinity pool, knees drawn up, chin resting on them. One leg bent, the other a prosthetic straight out in front like a defiant question mark. He didn't move much, just watched the other kids laugh, splash, and run. He didn't seem jealous, more like he had already accepted the terms of his exile. Amara saw herself in that stillness. She knew what it was like to be the only one who looked different in a room. She knew what it felt like to have eyes follow you but never meet yours. She also knew what it meant to carry pain in silence. Her childhood in Atlanta wasn't easy. She was the darkest girl in her class, the one teachers underestimated and classmates mocked. They called her names burnt toast, mudface, shadow girl. But her grandmother taught her to answer cruelty with clarity, not bitterness. You don't need to fight every battle, Grandma Ruth had said. You just need to know who you are. So when Amara saw Eli, she didn't see a rich boy with a disability. She saw a child learning to survive rejection. She started bringing him little things, extra napkins with silly doodles, ice cream cups when he thought no one was watching, and once, a tiny folded paper swan she'd learned to make on TikTok. She never asked for anything in return. Just a smile, a nod, a spark of recognition. Most days, he didn't respond. But she kept showing up anyway. Not out of pity, not to impress anyone, but because something in her gut told her this mattered. That this boy, for all his privilege and isolation, needed someone to show him that difference didn't mean broken. Amara wasn't perfect. She got tired. She got frustrated. There were nights when her feet throbbed so badly after double shifts, she had to soak them in ice water just to fall asleep. But she still showed up the next morning, apron tied, name tag straight, smile intact. Because people like her didn't get the luxury of giving up. What stood out most about Amara wasn't her looks, though she was beautiful in that effortless way that made people pause. It was her eyes. Big, warm, full of questions and stories. They didn't just look at you. They reached in and said, I see you, even the parts you don't show. That's what Eli felt when she looked at him. Not curiosity, not judgment, just presence. And in a world that had taught him to expect nothing from anyone who wasn't paid to be near him, that presence was revolutionary. There's a reason some people break barriers without shouting. Amara did it with soft words, steady hands, and the kind of eye contact that said, you matter, even if the world told you otherwise. She didn't set out to be a hero. But sometimes, the world doesn't need heroes in capes. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to see what others pretend isn't there. And Amara? She saw Eli, long before anyone else did. The first time Eli spoke to Amara, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even a full sentence. But it was everything. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of hot where the air felt like syrup, and the pool was more a social stage than a place to swim. The resort kids were out in full force, designer swim trunks, names embroidered on towels, every laugh just a little too loud, like they were trying to prove something. Eli sat under the shade of a striped umbrella, arms wrapped around his leg, the one that was still his. His prosthetic jutted out awkwardly, stiff and silent. He wasn't hiding it. He just didn't know where to put it in a world that didn't make space for things that didn't look normal. Amara was working the pool deck, a tray balanced on one palm, her other hand full of lemonades with names written in permanent marker. She moved like someone who knew she was being watched, but didn't care. Graceful, focused, slightly amused by the ridiculousness of luxury. As she passed Eli's chair, she paused just for a second and bent down to his level. Hey, she said gently, her voice low enough not to attract attention. I've got an extra chocolate chip cookie, still warm. She held it out like a peace offering. Eli blinked. No one had offered him anything without asking what his last name was, or what his father did, or why his leg looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. He didn't say anything, just stared. Amara didn't flinch. She stayed right there, crouched on one knee, smiling, not the kind of smile adults give kids out of duty. It was a real one, slightly tilted, a little shy, like she wasn't sure he'd take it. I used to sit alone too, she added, looking out at the pool. It sucks, especially when everyone else is pretending they don't see you. Still no words from Eli, just a long, thoughtful pause. Then, finally, his voice, soft and scratchy like it hadn't been used in days. Thanks. One word, one syllable, but Amara heard what was behind it. He wasn't just thanking her for the cookie. He was thanking her for not making him feel like a project, for not flinching, for not pretending he didn't exist. She sat down on the edge of the lounger next to him, careful to keep a respectful distance, her tray now resting on the poolside table. No rush, no agenda, just presence. "I'm Amara," she said. "I'm just here for the summer, but I'll be around. In case you want to talk or not talk. That's cool too." He looked at her then, really looked. "You're not like them," he said quietly. Amara raised an eyebrow, amused. "Them?" He nodded toward the group of kids doing cannonballs into the pool, all gleaming teeth and too loud voices. "They act like they're not scared of anything," he said, then looked down at his leg. "But they're scared of me." That hit her in the chest. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. She leaned in just slightly. "They're not scared of you, Eli. They're scared of seeing something they don't understand, and people don't like what they don't understand." He seemed to think about that. Then he glanced at her hand resting on her knee, brown skin, freckles, chipped nail polish. "Did they ever get scared of you?" "All the time," she said with a small laugh. "Still happens. Sometimes it's the way I talk, or the way I look, or the way I don't act like I'm sorry for existing." He cracked the tiniest smile, the kind that takes more strength than 1,000 words. And in that quiet, beneath the hum of poolside chatter and the clink of glassware, something settled between them. Not friendship, not yet, but recognition. Two people from completely different worlds, both carrying invisible wounds, both learning how to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness, and both knowing, deep down, that the loneliest places aren't physical. They're emotional. They're the spaces where no one meets your eyes, where you're told without words that you don't belong. That day, Eli didn't run, he didn't shrink, he stayed. Because someone finally saw him. And Amara? She had no idea what that one cookie would lead to. But that's the thing about kindness. You never know what it'll spark. Eli Whitmore was born into a world built on glass. Not fragile in the way most people think, but transparent. Everything about his life was visible, monitored, controlled, documented. His birth had made headlines: Whitmore tech heir, born at $15 million Manhattan penthouse. His first birthday? A private concert by John Legend. By the time he turned 6, his face had graced more magazine covers than most politicians. But behind every perfect photo was a boy unraveling. Eli had everything a child could want except what mattered most. Love, presence, truth. His father, Grayson Whitmore, was the kind of man who didn't just run empires, he created them. The founder of Whitmore Tech, he had revolutionized artificial intelligence, prosthetics, and smart security systems. He was a visionary, a billionaire before age 40, and a ghost by the time Eli could say, "Dad." Grayson believed in efficiency. Time was money, emotions were distractions, so he outsourced parenting the same way he outsourced coding: hire the best, pay them well, and expect performance. Nannies came and went, tutors rotated every semester, housekeepers didn't learn his name, they memorized his schedule. And then, there was his mother, Danica Whitmore. She was the soft light in Eli's life, an artist, a dreamer, the only one who knelt down to his level, who made pancakes on rainy mornings, who whispered stories about stars and spirits when he couldn't sleep. But everything changed on a cloudy afternoon in May. They were flying back from a charity gala in Chicago, just the three of them and a pilot. Eli, 7 years old, was strapped in with a coloring book on his lap, his mom beside him, humming some old Marvin Gaye tune under her breath. And then noise. Loud, violent, metal ripping through sky. The jet's engine failed. A bird strike. The pilot tried to land, but it was too fast, too low, too late. Eli never saw the moment the cabin cracked open. He only remembered waking up in a white room with pain screaming from his right leg and his mother nowhere in sight. They told him later gently, with slow words, and held hands, that she hadn't made it, that she had shielded him with her body, that her arms were the last thing he felt before blacking out. He believed them, because after she was gone, everything turned cold. The hospital stay lasted 5 weeks. The surgeries blurred together: skin grafts, bone repairs, the amputation itself. No one prepared him for the phantom pain, for the nightmares, for the looks. Kids can be cruel, but adults can be worse. They either stared too long or looked away too fast, as if his missing leg was some shameful secret they didn't want to acknowledge. By the time he returned home to a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a staff of 12, he didn't know how to be a kid anymore. His father didn't help. Grayson visited the hospital once late at night, alone, dressed like he was on his way to a board meeting. He stood at the door, watched Eli sleep for 5 minutes, then left. No hug, no words. Just absence. After that, Eli built walls. Not real ones, emotional ones. He stopped asking questions, stopped expecting warmth. He poured himself into Lego sets, puzzle cubes, and books about machines. At least machines made sense. They didn't lie, they didn't leave. He grew up fast, too fast. By 10, he had memorized the entire periodic table and could assemble his own drone. But he still flinched when someone touched his shoulder unexpectedly. Still woke up crying for a mother he barely remembered. People assumed money cushioned the pain. It didn't. If anything, it isolated it. Because grief, when surrounded by wealth, gets buried under distractions. You don't cry in public when your last name is Whitmore. You don't limp. You don't struggle. You appear polished, even when you're falling apart. So Eli learned to disappear in plain sight. Until Amara showed up. She didn't treat him like a puzzle to solve or a problem to fix. She didn't tiptoe around his past or pretend his leg didn't exist. She just Saturday listened, offered cookies and silence in equal measure. And for the first time in years, Eli felt something unfamiliar. Safe. The warning came wrapped in a smile. Not the kind of smile that meant, good job, or, we appreciate you. It was tight, controlled. The kind of smile people give when they want to put you back in your place without raising their voice. Amara, can I see you in the back for a minute? It was Lindsay, the resort's guest relations manager. Blonde, polished, heels clicking like punctuation on the marble floors. She spoke in that sugary tone used to discipline employees without making it sound like discipline. Amara followed her past the juice bar and down a side hallway, away from guests and security cameras. The hallway was quiet, lit by overhead fluorescents that buzzed softly, and smelled faintly of lemon-scented floor cleaner. Lindsay closed the door behind them. "I've been hearing things," she began, flipping through something on her iPad like she was searching for the right tone. "Okay," Amara said calmly, already sensing where this was going. "Apparently," Lindsay continued, "you've been spending quite a bit of time with one of our guests, a child." Amara blinked. "You mean Eli?" Lindsay didn't answer, just tilted her head and smiled that same smile. "You understand," she said slowly. "We have very clear boundaries here. Staff are expected to be professional at all times, especially around our VIP guests." Amara folded her arms. "What exactly did I do that crossed a line?" There was a pause. "Well," Lindsay said, "you've been observed sitting with him, talking beyond service needs, offering personal items. Things like cookies, hand-drawn notes, and apparently you were seen laughing together yesterday." She said, laughing like it was a crime. "I didn't know smiling was against the rules," Amara said softly. "It's not about smiling," Lindsay replied quickly. "It's about perception. These families pay a lot of money to be here, and they expect a certain distance, professionalism." Amara's jaw tightened. "You mean they expect their servers not to be human?" she said. Lindsay's face twitched. "I'm not saying that," she replied. "But it's important to remember your role. You're here to serve, not to befriend." That word serve hit Amara like a slap. Not help, not support, serve. It was a reminder. Not just of the job, but of the hierarchy. Because the unspoken rule was always clear. You can pour the drinks, clear the plates, even smile. But the second you become visible in a way that feels too personal, you become a problem. Especially if you're a young black woman showing kindness to a rich white child. Amara took a deep breath. She wanted to speak, to push back, but she also knew the game. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with tuition coming due, not with rent in DC, already late. So she nodded, slowly, carefully. "I understand," she said. Lindsay smiled again, satisfied. "Good. Just keep things appropriate." And with that, she turned and left the room, heels clicking away like nothing ever happened. But something had. Because what Lindsay didn't know was that Eli had heard the whole thing. He'd followed them quietly, just far enough to hear voices but not be seen. He hadn't planned to eavesdrop, he just knew Amara had disappeared and he didn't trust anyone else. So he'd stood there, behind the door, listening as the only person who treated him like a human was told to stop. Later that afternoon, Amara found a folded note near her serving station. No name. Just a small piece of paper written in messy, childlike print. "I'm sorry they were mean to you because of me. You're the only person who talks to me like I'm real. Please don't stop." She held the note for a long time. Because kindness in secret costs more than most people realize. And being human in a place that only wants robots is the bravest thing you can do. Grayson Whitmore wasn't used to interruptions. His life ran on precision 5-minute phone calls, zero inbox clutter, every second accounted for. Even on vacation, he carried his phone like a lifeline, more connected to boardrooms than beaches. So when Eli knocked on the glass door of his father's office suite inside the resort's private villa, it wasn't part of the schedule. Grayson looked up, slightly annoyed, then checked the time. 3 minutes, he muttered, more to himself than to his son. Eli stepped in quietly, clutching a folded napkin in one hand, the one Amara had doodled on. A tiny cartoon robot with one leg and a smiley face. It was silly, but to Eli, it meant something. Grayson didn't look up again, just kept typing. Eli stood there for a moment, watching his father's fingers fly across the keyboard, wondering how someone could move so fast and yet feel so distant. "I want to ask you something," Eli said, voice barely above a whisper. Grayson didn't answer, but the typing slowed. That was his way of saying, "Go ahead." "It's about Amara," Eli continued. She's the only person here who talks to me. I want to invite her to build something with me. Like Lego. Just for an hour." Grayson's hands stopped. He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. "Amara," he said slowly, like he was tasting the name for the first time. "She's the waitress, isn't she?" Eli nodded. Grayson leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Eli," he said calmly, "we don't mix with staff. It sends the wrong message." "The wrong message?" Eli asked, confused. "She's nice to me. That's the message." Grayson sighed. "You don't understand how the world works yet. These people, they're not your friends. They're paid to smile, to serve, and getting attached to someone like that will only make things messy." "She's not messy," Eli said, louder now. "She's kind. She sees me." Grayson's tone turned colder. "She's beneath you." The words hit Eli like a slap, not loud, but sharp. Final. His heart sank. For a moment, all the things he wanted to say swelled in his throat. The truth about how lonely he felt, how broken he felt, how Amara was the only person who looked him in the eye without pity. But all of it collapsed under the weight of that one sentence. "She's beneath you." He stood there, silent, humiliated, staring at the man who had given him his last name but not much else. Grayson picked up his phone again. "I have a call in 2 minutes. We'll discuss this later." Eli didn't move. Grayson glanced up. "That's all, Eli." The boy turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. But something in him had changed. He didn't cry. He didn't throw anything. He just walked back to his room, sat on the floor, and stared at the drawing Amara had given him, the little robot with one leg. And for the first time since the accident, Eli felt something stronger than sadness. Defiance. If his father couldn't see value in kindness, maybe he didn't deserve to define what value meant. Because Eli knew what real connection looked like. And it wasn't found in spreadsheets or shareholder meetings. It was in warm cookies. In silly doodles. In a waitress with soft eyes who never once made him feel broken. It happened on the back steps behind the resort kitchen. The air smelled like lemon zest and rosemary remnants from that evening's fancy guest dinner. The staff had cleared out for their break, and the sky had shifted from gold to deep navy. Stars blinked overhead, barely visible against the glow of the resort lights. Eli sat beside Amara, his knees pulled up, one leg tucked under, the other the prosthetic resting stiffly on the concrete. He had barely spoken a word since his conversation with his father. But he had come looking for her anyway. That mattered. Amara leaned back, her elbows on the railing, letting the breeze play with the loose strands of her braids. She glanced at him, quiet, knowing something unspoken hung heavy in the air. "You okay?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away, just looked down at his hands, clenched together in his lap. "My dad said you were beneath me," he finally said. Amara didn't flinch. I figured he might. Eli looked at her, searching for something, anger, hurt, even pity. But she wasn't offering any of those. She just nodded slowly, like she'd heard those words before. "You know," she began, "when I was your age, I used to hate my skin." Eli blinked. He wasn't expecting that. Amara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I went to a mostly white school in the suburbs of Atlanta. My mom worked 2 jobs to keep me there because the public schools in our neighborhood were not great." Eli listened, silently. "On the first day of 3rd grade, a girl asked me if I was dirty because of how dark I was. She didn't even say it mean, just curious, like I was some strange animal at the zoo." She paused, staring out into the dark trees beyond the fence. "Kids called me burnt toast, shadow girl, mud monster, every day. Teachers ignored it, told me to focus on learning, not feelings. So I did. I focused. I got straight A's. Won spelling bees, memorized poems, but nothing made the name stop." Eli's eyes widened. He knew how that felt, not the words, but the weight. The constant reminder that you were not what people expected, not what they wanted. "One time," Amara continued, her voice quieter now, "I got into a fight. A boy said I'd never be beautiful because no one likes girls that look like burnt pancakes. I hit him, got suspended." Eli stared at her. "What happened after that?" Amara smiled a little. "I got sent to the counselor's office. I thought I was in trouble. But she just looked at me and said, 'You're not too dark, they're just too small.'" He let that settle. She was the first adult to say something kind to me that year. Just one sentence, but I never forgot it. That's the thing about people, Eli. We remember the ones who see us even if it's just for a moment. There was silence between them now. But it wasn't awkward. It was full. Full of everything Eli had never said. Full of everything Amara had learned to carry without complaint. "Finally," he whispered, "I think you're beautiful." Amara looked at him. "Not just because of your face," he added quickly. "Because of you. Like how you talk. And how you don't let people make you smaller." Her eyes shimmered, not from vanity, but from the purity of the moment. Because this wasn't flattery. It wasn't about looks. It was about being seen. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking just a little. "That means more than you know." Eli hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the small robot drawing she'd once given him. "I kept it," he said. "It's dumb, but I kept it." Amara laughed softly. "It's not dumb. He's got one leg. Just like someone I know." They smiled together, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a rich kid and a resort worker sitting on concrete steps. It felt like 2 people. 2 survivors. 2 hearts that had been told, in different ways, that they didn't belong and still chose to love the world anyway. That night, they didn't talk about money, or status, or rules. They talked about courage, and how the people who've been laughed at the most are often the ones who end up healing others. It started with a hallway. A long, carpeted one lined with oversized paintings and artificial silence. The kind of silence you could only afford if your last name carried weight. Eli knew every inch of the VIP wing. Knew how the security cameras blinked every 10 seconds. Knew the guards rotated shifts at 7 p.m. sharp. Knew that no one ever expected the billionaire's son to walk anywhere without permission. Which is exactly why he did it. Eli had spent 3 days trapped in that wing since his conversation with his father. His meals were delivered by staff who never made eye contact. His tablet had been misplaced. And Amara? Vanished from the floor. He hadn't seen her once since that night on the back steps. Grayson Whitmore didn't raise his voice, but he didn't have to. He simply made people disappear. But Eli wasn't ready to let her disappear. So at 7:06 p.m., while the world outside his suite buzzed with cocktails and soft jazz, Eli slipped out the side door. No guards, no assistants. Just a boy with one leg and a backpack full of Legos. He moved quickly but carefully, staying in the shadows, ducking behind carts and planters. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest, not just from fear but from something unfamiliar. Hope. He made it to the staff corridor, past the linen closets, past the employees-only signs, until he reached the double doors leading to the kitchen. The moment he pushed them open, the air changed. It was warm, alive, full of sizzling pans, shouted orders, and bursts of laughter. It was chaos, but it was real. No pretense, no stiff handshakes. Just people doing their jobs and talking like family. Amara was by the prep counter, hair pulled up into a messy bun, apron stained with marinara. She was laughing with one of the line cooks over something on her phone until she saw him. Her eyes widened. "Eli?" she said, stepping forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "What are you? How did you even get in here?" He shrugged, smiling. "Told the guards I was going to find better food." She looked around, lowering her voice. "If they catch you here, I could lose my job." "I know," he said, "but I had to see you." Amara paused, then exhaled. "You're lucky. You're cute." She led him to a quiet corner by the dessert station, pulling out a stool for him to sit on. One of the pastry chefs, an older woman named Rosa, winked and handed him a fresh croissant like it was a secret. Eli placed the backpack on the counter and unzipped it. Inside, a Lego set. Not just any set. A custom build he'd started weeks ago, a robot with one leg, standing tall on a platform of tiny gray bricks. "I thought maybe we could finish it," he said. Amara smiled. She couldn't help it. "You brought a Lego project to a kitchen?" He nodded. "You brought cookies to a pool deck." Fair point. They spent the next hour side by side, clicking pieces into place while the kitchen moved around them. Servers darted past with trays. Cooks yelled out dish times. Rosa hummed an old R&B tune while folding dough. But in their little corner, it felt like the world had slowed down. Amara wasn't just smiling, she was relaxed, unfiltered. She told Eli about her favorite childhood book, about how she used to imagine being a space explorer just to escape the world she grew up in. Eli listened like her words were gold. At one point, she looked at the robot and said, "He doesn't look broken to me." Eli looked down at it, then at his leg. Maybe he isn't. For the first time, the prosthetic didn't feel like something that made him less. It felt like something that made him, him. That night, Eli didn't just break a rule. He built something no one could see, but something that mattered more than money, status, or legacy. He built trust. The photo changed everything. One blurry image, taken at the wrong time, from the wrong angle, by someone with just enough access to cause real damage. It showed Eli, the one-legged heir to Whitmore Tech, sitting on a prep counter in the resort kitchen, smiling. Next to him, Amara laughing, apron still tied around her waist, holding a Lego piece like it was a glass of champagne. To anyone who knew them, the photo captured something beautiful. To Grayson Whitmore, it was a public relations disaster waiting to explode. The image landed in his inbox at 6:47 a.m. Subject line, urgent. Staff guest boundaries violated. Below it was a short note from one of his assistants, outlining inappropriate behavior, unauthorized staff access, and security risk to the Whitmore name. He didn't even finish reading. By 7:02, he was in a car on the way to the resort kitchen. The doors slammed open like a courtroom scene from a movie. Cooks froze mid-chop. The manager went pale, and Amara, still setting up the coffee station, stiffened as soon as she saw him. Grayson didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice came out low, controlled, lethal. "Is this how you repay our hospitality?" Amara blinked. "Sir, You were hired to serve," he cut her off. "Not to manipulate, not to cross lines, and certainly not to sneak around with my son." Amara straightened her shoulders, trying to remain calm. "I didn't sneak around. Eli came to me. He just wanted someone to talk to, someone who treats him like a human being." Grayson stepped closer, towering over her. "And that someone was you?" There it was, the implication behind every word. She wasn't like them, didn't belong, didn't know her place. Before she could respond, the general manager of the resort appeared, clearly flustered, holding a clipboard and sweating through his collar. "Mr. Whitmore," he said nervously, "I've already prepared the termination paperwork. Miss Jackson's access will be revoked within the hour." Amara didn't flinch. Grayson didn't look at her again. He just turned, smoothed his jacket sleeve, and walked out as if the matter had already been erased from history. But it hadn't. Because standing in the hallway half hidden behind the door was Eli. He'd woken early, heard the noise, followed the voices, and watched it all. His heart pounded as he stepped forward. "You fired her?" he asked, voice trembling. Grayson turned around, visibly surprised. "You should be in your room. You fired her," Eli repeated. "Why?" Grayson's expression hardened. "Because she crossed a line. She put herself in a position of influence over you." "She was my friend," Eli said, louder now. "She didn't ask for anything. She never used me. She just cared." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You're 10 years old. You don't understand what caring looks like." "I understand it better than you do," Eli snapped. The silence after that was deafening. Even the kitchen staff held their breath. Grayson's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. He simply turned and walked away. But the damage had been done. The staff whispered. The resort guests noticed Amara's absence. And Eli? He felt something new, not just sadness, betrayal. He waited outside the staff entrance for an hour, then 2, hoping Amara would walk through those doors, hoping someone would say it was all a mistake. But instead, Rosa, the pastry chef, came out holding a brown envelope. "She asked me to give this to you," she said quietly, handing it over. Inside, a note. "Eli, I'm sorry I had to go like this. I didn't get to say goodbye. But know this, what we shared was real. And no one can take that away from us. Keep building. Keep believing. You're more than your last name. You're more than one leg. You're whole. Love, Amara." He read it 3 times, then folded it and tucked it into the same pocket where he kept the robot drawing, because he wasn't ready to forget. Not her. Not the way she made him feel. Not the courage it took to be kind in a world full of rules. The storm didn't start with thunder. It started with silence. At precisely 6:14 a.m., the housekeeper entered Eli's suite to deliver his breakfast tray, blueberry pancakes, turkey, bacon, fresh orange juice. Same routine, same tray, same schedule down to the minute. But the room was empty. The bed untouched. The tablet still charging on the nightstand. The window cracked open just an inch. She stood there for a moment, confused. Maybe he was in the bathroom. Maybe he'd gone down early for a walk. But 10 minutes later, after checking every corner of the suite, her confusion turned to worry. At 6:32 a.m., she notified guest services. By 6:47, the general manager was pounding on Grayson Whitmore's door in a panic. "Sir, it's about your son. He's missing." That word hit like a bullet. Grayson was on his feet instantly, voice cold and sharp. "What do you mean missing? He doesn't leave without my permission." "We've searched his entire floor," the manager stammered. "His key card hasn't been used since yesterday afternoon. Security footage, well, there's a blind spot near the loading dock." "You lost my son," Grayson said through clenched teeth. Within minutes, the entire resort was thrown into chaos. Staff were pulled from kitchens, security teams were deployed to every entrance, drones were launched over the nearby beach trails, the pool was cleared. Guests were politely but firmly advised to remain in their rooms. Whispers spread fast. "The Whitmore kid's gone. Did he run away? Was he taken?" Theories exploded like fireworks behind every closed door. But no one knew the truth. No one knew that Eli had slipped out just before dawn, quiet as a shadow, careful as ever. No one saw him clutching the note. Amara left him, tucked into the same backpack as the Lego robot. No one knew he had a plan. Because when you're 10 and rich and invisible, you learn to move like smoke. He wasn't running away forever. He just needed to breathe. To think. To go somewhere no one could control him. Not his father. Not the cameras. Not the polished walls of a resort that felt more like a cage than a home. He took the back trail behind the tennis courts, down the hill, past the abandoned lifeguard shack. He knew the property map better than anyone thought. He'd memorized every inch of it during his quiet afternoons alone. By the time the search teams were dispatched, Eli was already 2 miles down the beach, hidden beneath the overhang of a collapsed dune, the waves crashing just out of reach. And for the first time in days, he wasn't scared. He was free. Back at the resort, Grayson stood in the security control room, eyes glued to a wall of monitors. "Find him," he growled. "I don't care what it takes." But what Grayson didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that Eli wasn't lost. He just didn't want to be found. Not until someone started seeing him for who he really was. The early morning fog hung low over the beach. The sun was only a whisper on the horizon, and waves rolled in soft, steady rhythms, wetting the sand in silver trails. Eli crouched behind the wooden skeleton of the old beach shack, its paint long peeled, wood splintered, nails rusted. He hugged his knees, the salty breeze sweeping through his hair. The backpack with the Lego robot sat beside him, zipped half open, pieces scattered a little. He hadn't heard footsteps at first. Just the ocean, gulls calling, the occasional distant roll of a wave. His heart still pounded, not in fear this time, but a hollow that had grown inside him when Amara was gone and his father had fired her. He closed his eyes and thought of that note. What we shared was real. No one can take that away from us. He repeated that line over and over like a prayer, wishing it were enough. Then he heard her voice. Soft, steady, carrying over the hush of early dawn. "Eli?" He opened his eyes. Light broke through the fog in slanted beams. Amara appeared, walking barefoot on the damp sand, her apron still tied loosely around her waist, the hems brushing the sand. She carried a fleece cardigan in one arm, and with the other, she held a paper bag. "Hey," she said, stepping up beside the shack. She knelt, as if entering a secret place. "You okay?" He didn't answer at first. He just stared at the gray wood, at the broken windows, at the way the ocean mist was glistening on the boards. The cold seeped through his clothes. The prosthetic leg felt heavy, anchor-like, pulling him down. Amara opened the paper bag and pulled out a thermos of hot cocoa and cinnamon biscuits, simple things. She offered him a biscuit, her fingers gentle, never hurried. "I thought you might be hungry." He accepted the biscuit, biting into it slowly. The crunch, the sweetness, the warmth, it grounded him. "Why did you come?" he asked, finally, voice low. Amara exhaled. She sat on a piece of driftwood close by, letting her cardigan fall around her shoulders. She looked out at the ocean, then back at him. "I couldn't leave you alone. I know what it feels like to be invisible. And I know you didn't really disappear. You ran because you needed someone to see you, not just your leg, not just your name." He chewed quietly, the biscuit breaking into crumbs. It tasted better than any breakfast he'd been served in the VIP suite. The kind of better that didn't need fancy plates or gold trim, just real. "I thought about telling my mom, or calling someone," he said. "But I didn't. I needed this." "Invisible," he murmured, staring at the shack's broken door, the boards that had once been whole. Amara nodded. "I'm sorry your dad doesn't see you, but I see you, Eli." Her words were simple. They didn't fill the silence, but the silence felt safe. He swallowed hard. "I hate that he fired you." She looked down, fingers tracing circles in the sand. "I hated it too, but I didn't regret it." He looked up. "Do you regret being my friend?" Her eyes caught the first full ray of the rising Sunday. She gave him a small, straight smile. "Never." Eli allowed himself to lean forward, letting the cold go. "Thank you for finding me." They sat there a long time, watching the ocean roll in and out, the horizon glowing brighter. Amara told him about her grandmother's garden back home, purple irises, magnolia blossoms, and how sunlight made the petals glow gold in the morning. She said all she wanted was a place where people smiled because they meant it. Eli listened. He felt something stirring in his chest, not anger, not sadness, but something else. Promise. Finally he stood up, legs trembling, but he stood. He stretched like he hadn't in days, the prosthetic creaking a little. Amara stood too. "You don't have to go back yet," she said. "You can stay here a little while, if you want." He looked at her. The waves crashed, seagulls drifted overhead, The air tasted salty, and for a moment, he felt free. He shook his head. I have to go back. But I want you to come with me. So they see you. So they see me. Amara paused. Her eyes flicked toward the resort, shining distantly on the bluff. She nodded. Okay. They walked back across the damp sand, footsteps side by side, Eli's gait uneven at first, but he leaned on something steadier than the sea breeze. Connection. Shared truth. Someone who believed. As they crossed under the lodge lights and past silent security gates, he realized something important. Sometimes running away doesn't mean giving up. Sometimes it just means creating ground to stand on. Back in the resort courtyard, a cleaner spilled a trash can, a door clanged, but the world felt different. Not perfect, not easy, but different. Amara squeezed his hand. You're going to be okay. He nodded. And even though the dawn still carried fear of what his father would say, what the management would enforce, Eli felt something crack open inside him. Hope. And for the first time in many mornings, he believed it might stay. Morning broke over the Hamptons with an unusual energy. The salty ocean air felt electric, like the whole resort had been holding its breath. Word had spread fast that Eli was missing overnight, and then found beside that old beach shack by Amara. Reporters had already started positioning cameras at the gates. Local news vans idled by the drive, satellite dishes on their roofs. Grayson Whitmore walked into the grand lobby, his steps echoing on marble floors. Wealth, privilege, power. He carried it all quietly, almost like diffracted light. But today, his face was tight. The kind of tension you see when a public image cracks. Amara stood off to the side, wrapped in a light shawl. She looked calm, but the stage she was about to step on was enormous. Guests paused in their breakfasts, staff hushed in doorways, and the media lights felt like suns burning through morning haze. A microphone was brought out on a raised platform by the fountain. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters leaned in. Local anchor women in crisp blazers, cameramen with heavy lenses. A journalist from the New York Times, another from the Daily News, a freelance photographer. Eli stood beside Amara, slightly behind, his one-leg prosthetic visible beneath a pair of shorts. The crowd burst into murmurs, some sympathetic, some judgmental, some curious. Children pointed. Guests stepped back. Security formed a loose perimeter, but left space for this moment. Amara cleared her throat. The hush was sudden and deep. Her voice carried over marble, over palm trees, over every expectation. My name is Amara Jackson, she said. I worked here, as a waitress. But I'm here today, not as a server, but as someone who believes every person, no matter their skin, or their body, or their job, deserves dignity, kindness, and to be seen. She glanced at Eli, who looked back at her with a quiet strength. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't shake. It was steady like steady rain, clear like sunlight through stained glass. When I met Eli, she continued, I saw a child who was alone, not because of what he was missing his leg, but because of what everyone else thought he should be. I saw someone taught to hide, taught to believe he had to prove his worth just to belong. Reporters scribbled. Cameras zoomed. Amara's words cut through the facade of wealth and silence. She told them about the note she left him, about the Lego robot he kept in his backpack, about how he risked everything, his schedule, his father's displeasure to be seen. One reporter shouted a question. Why speak up now? Aren't you afraid of retaliation? Amara's lips curved in a soft half-smile. I have nothing to lose that matters more than seeing someone human. I may lose this job, but I will not lose my voice. At that, there was applause, a few claps. Some guests stood up, murmurs turned into cheers. Then Grayson stepped forward, tall, composed, powerful. When he spoke, his voice carried both shock and calculation. A lot has happened in the past 24 hours, he said. But I would be wrong not to acknowledge that Amara showed courage, not because she sought recognition, but because she believed and acted. Eli felt something shift in the air. Validation tasted like tears he didn't have to swallow anymore. Grayson paused, looking out at the cameras. I will commit to doing better. To listening more. To letting my son make his own relationships. To holding our resort to higher standards. Another question from a reporter. What about the staff policies? Boundaries between VIP guests and wait staff, will that change? Grayson nodded. Yes, we are reviewing our entire guest-staff relationship policy. I want to ensure kindness, respect, safety, not just for my son, but for everyone who works here. Amara nodded, breathing in as relief mixed with something heavier. Responsibility. Because now the world was watching. By noon, headlines had gone live. Black waitress becomes voice for kindness. 10-year-old heir whose voice was silent finds a friend. Privilege, power, and empathy. A resort's reckoning. Social media lit up. Clips of her speech circulated. Influencers posted quotes. Local politicians expressed support. Amara's phone buzzed with messages, some of gratitude, some of outrage, some of threats. But she held her ground. Because standing up had never been about her safety. It had been about Eli. It had been about all the Elis who feel unseen. By late afternoon, Eli's father had called in staff meetings. The management gathered in the great banquet hall. Amara was not fired. Instead, Grayson asked the staff to make changes to instill respect and humanity, to ensure that no child or employee ever felt invisible under his roof again. That evening, Amara was invited to a community center gathering in Southampton. People came to hear her, to thank her, to share stories of their own invisibilities. Her story became their story too. And Eli sat beside her, clutching his robot drawing, smiling not because the world changed overnight but because someone believed him loud enough that the world could hear. 1 year later, a small brick building stood on a quiet street in the town next to the resort. It had large windows, a freshly painted sky blue door, and a simple sign above, Light and Worth Center, a name Amara had chosen because sometimes people just need a light to show them their worth. It was opening day. Eli was there too. He wore a simple tee and jeans. His prosthetic was upgraded now, sleeker, more comfortable, less painful. A lot of therapy, lots of courage, and a real doctor who believed him made all that possible. He walked without stiffness, with confidence in his step. Inside the center, there were rooms painted soft, yellow and mint green, walls lined with bookshelves full of colorful books, a craft room with tables covered in crayons, glue sticks, and modeling clay, a movement room with soft mats, mirrors, and a low balance beam, a place for children to move and stretch and laugh without fear. Parents pursued their kids through the craft room, watching warily. Teachers from local schools stopped by. Some community leaders were there, invited by Amara and Grayson. Reporters came, too, this time not with scandal, but with praise. Amara stood at a podium near the ribbon, scissors in hand. She wore a sky blue blouse, simple jeans, her box braids tied back. None of the fancy dress she once wore at the resort. She smiled wide, breathing in the morning air that felt like possibility. "Thank you, everyone," she said. Her voice was steady, warm. "When I started working at the resort, I thought I was only helping one boy, one child who felt unseen. But over this past year, I've realized there are many children like Eli kids who are told that being different means being less." She paused, glancing at Eli, who stood beside her, arms folded, his head held high. "This center is for them, for the kids who need more than physical therapy. They need kindness. They need someone to say, 'I see you. You belong.' We will offer support groups, speech therapy, adaptive physical education, art therapy, and mentoring, all free of charge." The crowd clapped. Some had tears. There were moms in wheelchairs, families of children with different abilities, children who once hid their differences now bouncing around the rooms in excitement. Eli stepped forward. "Hi," he said quietly. "I used to think I had to play by rules I never chose, that I had to be invisible. But thanks to Amara, thanks to people who believed, I now believe I deserve to be seen for who I am." Polite applause, many nods. Then Grayson came up to the podium. He had worked behind the scenes all year to raise funds, to secure grants, to develop programs. He cleared his throat. "I'm proud of Amara," he said. "Not just for what she's built, but for what she's taught me, that strength is not in hiding differences, but in embracing them. That power belongs to those with empathy, not just with privilege." After the ribbon was cut, the doors swung open. Kids poured in. One little girl with a hearing aid tapped her way to the craft table. A boy in a wheelchair rolled into the movement room, where instructors greeted him with soft voices and open arms. Amara guided Eli to a corner where there was a wall of mirrors. "Want to try something?" she asked. He nodded. She handed him a paintbrush and a palette. "Paint a self-portrait, not how people see you, how you see yourself." Eli pressed brush to canvas. He painted a boy with one leg, bright blue shirt, standing on a field of green. Beside him, a girl with dark skin, just like Amara, braids, laughing. The sun above them, huge, golden. He stepped back, chin up, and watched it dry. Later, parents and kids shared stories. A mother of a child with autism talked about her daughter finally feeling welcomed. A father of a boy who stuttered spoke through tears when his son said, "Mama," for the first time in weeks because of the speech therapy program. Teachers pledged to work with light and worth to bring sensibility and inclusion into their classrooms. By afternoon, the center had run out of its welcome cookies. The coffee urn was low, but the energy stayed strong. Laughter echoed down the halls. Footsteps, paint smudges, glue in hair. Someone tripped over a rug and giggled. It was beautiful disorder, and it felt like hope in motion. Eli looked at Amara, radiant. "We did good," he said softly. She smiled, eyes bright. "We did more than good, we changed something." As the sun dipped and people drifted home, Eli stayed behind, voice barely audible. "Thank you for believing in me." Amara squeezed his shoulder. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak your truth." That night, as Amara locked the doors and turned off the lights, she passed by Eli's painting. It hung in the hall. She paused, taking it in. That boy with one leg was seen, not just for what he'd lost, but for what he had: courage, voice, a heart that refused to stay silent. And for the first time, she believed the world could shift not by force, but by kindness, connection, and truth. In the end, it wasn't wealth that changed Eli's life. It wasn't his father's empire, the 5-star resort, or the $35,000 prosthetic leg. It was a moment. A question. A cup of ice cream held out by someone who didn't see his name, his bank account, or what he was missing but simply saw him. "You like chocolate or vanilla?" That moment sparked a conversation. That conversation sparked trust. And trust? That built a bridge. One that carried Eli from isolation to connection, from silence to voice. The truth is, most people wait for permission to make a difference. They think they need a title, a following, a podium, or a paycheck. But what if the most powerful thing you could offer isn't power, it's presence? Amara didn't have influence. She had student debt, double shifts, and a schedule built around someone else's tips. But she also had eyes that noticed, a heart that stayed soft, and the courage to reach across an invisible line. She didn't set out to be a hero. She just refused to be silent. And that refusal, it made history. One boy saw himself differently. One father saw parenting differently. And a community saw kindness as more than charity. It became a movement. So here's the lesson. You don't need power to change a life. You need to care when no one else is watching. To listen when no one else hears. To show up when it would be easier to walk away. In a world obsessed with the loudest voices, the boldest brands, the biggest platforms, never underestimate the quiet revolution of kindness. Because lives aren't transformed by grand gestures. They're changed in the moments no one writes down. A smile in the hallway. A shared sandwich. A simple question asked at just the right time. That's what hidden worth is all about. Finding value where the world doesn't look. Lifting up stories that don't trend until they do. Because behind every viral video is a real human heart. And behind every broken system is a person brave enough to break the silence. Eli and Amara's story isn't rare because it's dramatic. It's rare because someone paid attention. Someone stayed when they could have walked away. Someone believed in what others ignored. And that someone could be you. So, if this story moved you even a little, don't let it stop here. Like this video to help more people hear it. Subscribe to Hidden Worth for more powerful stories like this. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that they matter, that they're seen, that being different isn't a flaw, it's a gift. And if you've ever been the Amara in someone's life, or wished you had one, drop a comment below. Tell your story. Because we're listening. Always. And remember, it doesn't take power to change a life. It just takes one moment of real kindness.